Good morning, and thank you all for joining us here today. My name is Sam Camarena, and I'm the manager of the CSU Advancement Academy here at the Cal State Chancellor's Office. On behalf of the CSU Events Professionals at Network Executive Council, it's my pleasure to welcome each of you to our first day of our 9th annual conference. Whether you're attending for the first time or you've been participating in previous sessions or past conferences, we hope you find today's content valuable. Before we begin, I want to share a few pieces of information about the CSU Events Professionals Network and a few ways that you can get engaged. The CSUEPN was founded in 2012 when Chris Lindmark and the talented San Diego State events team invited events professionals from across the CSU system for a day-long workshop to discuss challenges, share best practices, and network with each other. It was such a rewarding experience that it was decided to formalize the group and host an annual conference that would take place at a different CSU campus each year. The Executive Council was formed a few years later to provide infrastructure and ensure that the network continued to pay it forward and provide assistance to the new host campus. In spite of the pressures of the pandemic and with the ongoing support of the CSU Advancement Academy, the 2020-2021 academic year proved to be another year of growth for the network. In this last year, we've reached and maintained 100% participation from all 23 CSU campuses, as well as from representatives from several UCs and private institutions. The names of the Executive Council representatives are listed on the screen. If you're interested in serving on the Executive Council or one of the subcommittees, please feel free to contact Phyllis Grillo or your campus representative. In the last year, we've also gained many resources to help keep the network connected, including a listserv where you can opt in to receive updates from the CSUEPN, as well as post questions or challenges you're facing to receive feedback and answers from our membership. We encourage you to connect with us on social media as well by joining the CSUEPN Facebook or LinkedIn group and following us on our brand new Instagram. You can also explore recordings of previous CSUEPN programming on our YouTube channel. The links to all these outlets can be found in your conference emails as well as the chat. And please share the fun of this year's conference by using the hashtag CSUEPN21. Now in its second year, the CSUEPN Awards program has expanded to have 2 new awards. In addition to the Founders Award and the Beyond the Call of Duty Award, the categories now include the MVP, or Most Valuable Professional, and the Rising Star. All 4 of these awards will be conferred on day 4 of the conference on July 29th. The deadline for nominations has recently been extended, and they're now due by end of day on July 16th. Please don't delay to nominate a worthy colleague. Now I want to thank our summer series sponsors, Iconic Group, our platinum sponsor, Marching Order, Socio, the Commencement Group, and Chameleon Creative. Your support has really enhanced our event, and now I want to welcome to our virtual stage, Drew Carlisle, to make a few remarks on behalf of Iconic Group.
Thank you, Sam. On behalf of Iconic Group, it's my pleasure to welcome you to day 1 of the CSUEPN Summer Conference. We eagerly look forward to today's discussion about the world of hybrid events and how these demands impact your planning and execution. Over the last 18 months, the Iconic Group teams, both Balfour and Grad Images, have been honored to partner with university event planners throughout North America to support their success and maximize the impact of their events. Over that time, it's been our pleasure to participate in well over 5,000 events, celebrating the accomplishments of more than 1 million graduates amidst these challenging and unprecedented times. While the challenges forced by the pandemic have undoubtedly been numerous, they have provided our bright and talented personnel the opportunity to engage in deep self-reflection. This exploration initially began with reviewing how we could best adapt ourselves and our services to accommodate our partner institutions as they sought to deliver a worthy experience to their graduates. Admittedly, we expected this to be as much about our collective survival, how to achieve the end goal as painlessly as possible while delivering an experience as close to the historical precedents as could be accomplished. However, what transpired has been nothing short of astounding, and the university events community as a whole deserves to be commended for seizing the opportunity to not just deliver, but flourish in the face of this challenge. What we witnessed was a community of thousands of professionals rising to an incredible test that, just 2 years ago, was largely inconceivable. The speed of adaptation, the collective creativity and ingenuity to redefine an in-person event while continuing to comply with countless fluid and ever-changing safety measures was nothing short of remarkable. And the result of all this? A commencement renaissance. From the inevitable necessity for change, like a phoenix rising, is a new dawn in how these events are perceived. A renewed focus on prioritizing the graduate experience and seeking out ways to encapsulate this irreplaceable moment of pride and joy. We have been honored to be a part of it, and we cannot wait to stand beside our partners in university events in this great new age, preserving long-standing traditions and embracing new experiential innovations. We are eager to listen and learn more on how Iconic Group can support this continued evolution and uphold this critical pedestal of our business model to maximize the graduate experience. Thank you so much for having us, and Sam, back to you.
Thanks again, Drew. Pleasure to have you. And lastly, before we begin today's content, I want to share, or rather reiterate, the purpose of the CSUEPN, which is committed to bringing events professionals within higher education together to develop industry best practices and share great event ideas and support one another. Membership is open to any event professional within the CSU and UC, as well as private institutions of higher education in California. Membership is also free, so please help us grow by spreading the word amongst the event pros on your campus. And now I'll hand the show back to my colleagues to begin today's presentation.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Jessica Rowland, and I am the Program Specialist for Alumni Engagement at CSU Fullerton. Today, we're going on a journey, a pentathlon journey, as we learn how to fight for our events, shoot for perfection, breathe as we adapt, and ride out any storms as we race to the finish line. We are talking about hybrid events and not an Olympic sport, but it kind of feels like that.
That's exactly right, Jessica, and thank you for the welcome. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Bradshaw. I'm an event specialist down here at UC San Diego. And just like with in-person events, virtual events, and now hybrid events, event professionals need not worry. Today, you'll hear from industry experts, receive tips and tricks, and leave with confidence about planning and executing hybrid events.
That's right, Liz. It's going to be a fun day. My name is Ellie Fergon, Director of Events at CSU Bakersfield. Today, we're going to cover the 5 areas of hybrid events, and you might notice they're very similar to planning the oh-so-familiar in-person events of the past. It includes pre-planning and practice, budget management, technology, and of course, a virtual platform, guest experience, and finally, production. I also look forward to sharing a case study from a recent hybrid meeting we planned and executed at CSUB.
Well, I'm excited to dive into this session. Thanks for that preview, Ellie. My name is R. Paul Villaluz, Advancement Associate in the Office of the Vice President for University Advancement at Sacramento State. It's a good reminder as we kick this off today to remember that you're not alone. We are all in this together, and today we are lucky to have 2 industry professionals to share so much knowledge, Socio and Metro Media, as well as an expert on accessibility from Cal State LA. They will share tips on technology, platforms, and production, and how to use your budget, big or small, to be most effective. Yes, we're sure you've heard of hybrid events, but most of us have not done them. Think of today as a live case study. I'm actually here in a room with other attendees on the Sac State campus, where we hope to demystify and give you confidence in deciding whether or not hybrid is right for any of your future events. We have a packed agenda, and if you do have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A function, and we'll get to them toward the end of the program. But first, let's kick it back to Elizabeth and Jessica.
Thanks so much, Paul. As we mentioned, we are talking about hybrid events today, and this will be an interactive session. So we will be using a website called minty.com to be answering some poll questions and surveys. So what is a hybrid event? Why do we consider it a pentathlon of events? Because each step of producing a hybrid event is critically important, and there are multiple challenges that you must navigate through. Luckily, as Paul mentioned, we're in this together, and we're each striving to get the highest score so that we can get our gold medal. So let's start off easy. Have you even produced a hybrid event in your version or your definition of hybrid? Have you done one? Again, if you go to minty.com and enter in the code you see on the screen, you'll be able to participate live with us today and tell us your thoughts. There's also the QR code if you'd like to scan. If you're swabby like that and can scan and get on there, please do so. Again, there will be multiple questions throughout today, and we would love to hear your thoughts on everything. So, have we produced events? Let's see what our audience is saying. 67%, so, oh, look at it, it's changing. Unsure, 22. As you can see, many of us have not produced events or don't even know that we produced a hybrid event because we don't even know what it is yet. That's what we're going to be talking about today even more. So what does hybrid mean? You know, is there really just one definition of it? Can there be one? Should there be multiple? We're going on with thinking that hybrid has more than just one. That hybrid definition changes with your event and your needs of that event. So can there just be one? We don't think so. Let's take a deeper dive into this with Liz.
Thank you, Jessica. So we really at this point know that in-person is in person and virtual is fully virtual. But unlike a fully virtual event, which takes place exclusively online, a hybrid event also has in-person attendees. There are so many components that can live in between, and that's what we want to take a look at today. So Jessica and I will be taking a look at a top level overview, and in true hybrid style, we'll be asking quite a few questions. So don't put your phones and tablets down just yet. There'll be a lot more Menti fun. And then we'll be letting Metro Media and Socio take a deeper dive into some of these elements and why you would want to use them later in the program. In the academic event world, a hybrid event can be anything from a meeting to a conference to a building ceremony to an alumni networking event, and anything in between. It combines an in-person event with an online or digital experience. There will be elements that are geared towards those in person. So think food and seating as two of the top ones, and those that live purely remote. And there are plenty of things in the middle that bring those two together. These hybrid components could include anything from gamification to a Twitter wall, Mentimeter like we're doing today. Photo opportunities could be in person and virtual, live Q&A for people who are participating in both ways, giveaways, etc., etc. There are really no set rules, and everything is going to be tailored per your event goals. So to kick things off, we wanted to find out what some of those essential things are to you. What do you look for as really essential components as part of your hybrid event? So go ahead and go back to Menti on your phone and tablet. And this could be anything from an experiential component to a production line item, a platform to an MC for your event. So we'll give you all a few minutes to enter some of your ideas and what you really think are some of the must-have components of a hybrid event in here. Here we go. And don't be shy, by the way, because I think what we're hoping to do today is foster conversation. We really want to share ideas. We don't think there are any wrong answers whatsoever. Like we've already said, hybrid is something that is going to be different to everybody. And we'll go ahead and share these results a bit later on. So we've got lots of technology, interaction, good AV, large space capacity. I think I saw the ability for the event to live on. Accessible Q&A. Yeah, there are some really great planning time. That's a huge one. Yeah, making sure everyone has the same experience. Active engagement. Love all these. It's exciting. The appropriate technology, always very helpful. Again, interaction. Love it. Larger audience reach. That's a big one, and you'll definitely hear that come up a few times today. What do we have here? Multiple cameras, fun digital swag, of course, an MC host and a tech staff. Cool. Thank you for all of these. Look at this. We have 52 participants. And if you look, what I wanted to point out about Menti, it's got a ton of cool features as well. If you look into the bottom right corner, you can see the number of participants, and there's also a little comment function too. So if you have something that you want to say to either Jessica or I during these Mentimeter polls that you feel we've not covered, then please feel free to stick it in there and we'll be able to see it. Great. Woohoo! That's my favorite kind of comment. Perfect. Accessibility, we'll be talking about that a little bit, and media specialists. Wow, there's so much. This is so great. There are so many things we can get into, and again, thank you all for these. We'll move on so we can get to our presenters, but we will be sending these out after the presentation. So thank you. And don't put your phone down. So where did hybrid events come from? And we've put a couple of fun examples, or at least I think they're kind of nerdy and fun up here. I think we all know that hybrid events weren't invented because of the pandemic, even though it might have been the first time that some of us have really had to switch to virtual. But for many years, companies around the world have been looking and using hybrid events as a way to bring brand messaging, information, and experiences to a global audience. And it's really increasingly become a popular option. The world, I think we can all agree, is more connected than ever, and this really broadens our possibilities. I think that with hybrid and the pandemic, it's just really sped up the mechanisms and the investment that people have been putting in platforms and our use of them, so that we can get there a little bit faster than we might have done otherwise. So while this time in our lives might have been the first time that many of us had to pivot and head to a virtual event method so we could continue to make events, as we make the shift back to in-person, there are many individual skill sets and learnings and ideas we can take with us to keep progressing. And I don't know if you kind of read this slide here, but I thought it was kind of cool that one of the first university level hybrid events was held back in 1992. At that point, it was defined as a global seminar and used teleconferencing technology. So I think we've all come a pretty long way since then. So really, hybrid, it's going to be another type of event for your toolbox, something else cool that you can do if it's the right thing for your event. Really, there are endless possibilities to enhance your tried and true in-person experience. It can really provide greater inclusion and accessibility for those who are not able, or due to the pandemic, not really comfortable to join in person yet. Greater attendee reach really allows us to look past venue capacities that have anything to do with COVID or not, and also save on things like travel expenses. Sustainability, a reason that many national and international companies love hybrid events. It can reduce their carbon footprint and their bottom line. So a hybrid option can be a way to attend something that's not financially viable otherwise, or a smaller event could cut down on waste. So these are just a few ways that you can help support your campus sustainability efforts without compromising the delivery of your program or any goals of the event. And back to Menti to hear from all of you, and in true Olympic style, we would love for you to rank the reasons that your department or campus might choose to hold a hybrid event. And again, there are no wrong answers. So we have choices between venue capacity limits, increased options for attendee reach, option for attendees that are unable to or may not feel comfortable attending in person, creating an event experience or content that will live beyond the day of the event. And of course, as venue capacity limits. And as these move around, of course, I've lost my train of thought, but I see that we're getting some great options coming in here. And if you feel like we've really missed something glaringly obvious, again, we are in this with all of you all. So please feel free to kind of leave something in the comments if you have a different idea that we've failed to mention, or maybe something that's really important to your campus in particular. Cool. So we've got a clear front runner right now with 32 people participating. And I think I saw we had about 50 participating in the last one. So we'll leave this to get up there a little bit longer. Great. I think we've got some clear, wow, this is pretty consistent. I can see the bars bouncing around. Great. So first place option for attendees that aren't able to or may not feel comfortable attending in person. And again, we will go ahead and send these out so everybody can see following the event. And I'm going to hand back to Jessica for a little bit of a deeper dive into our goals, which are the most important reason we would do one of these events.
Thanks, Liz. It's true. When you're trying to decide if a hybrid event is right for your event, we really need to go back down to the very basic point of the event. What is your goal? Is your goal to be networking? Is it to be informative? Because that will definitely change why you would want to do a hybrid event or not. Just keep these things in mind and to see if a hybrid event would actually benefit what you're trying to do, or would it hinder it? Are you spending too much time trying to get it to be hybrid just to be hybrid when in all it never need to be? Always kind of take into your budget as well. If you're having a large event, maybe you need to have a bigger platform versus just Zoom. So the hybrid event, again, it's a great tool and option, but when you're deciding if it's right for you, really think about the goal of the event. What is the experience you want your attendees to leave with? So thinking about events and if they're right for you, why don't we talk about some of the benefits of hybrid events? Go ahead and go back onto Minty and let us know why you think a hybrid event is good. Why are the benefits of these for you and for your campus? The answers will stop popping up. As you can see, we have a cool word cloud, so you can see as people are typing in the answers. A wider reach, that's correct. Accessibility, inclusion, love this. I see reach coming in a bunch of times, and it's true. We can connect with our alumni, our students, our constituents, whether they're next door to us or across the world from us. It gives us that opportunity to really make connections in places that we didn't have the ability to do so beforehand. Look at all of these. This is great, guys. Thank you so much. So as you can see, there are many benefits to hosting a hybrid event. You get the best of both worlds, in person and in virtual. The events do live on past that event date if in hybrid, because you can record most of it. The data collection you can get from the technology side of the virtual event or hybrid event is crazy fun. And the repurposing of the event. The nice thing is, again, once you record these events, you can reuse them at a later date, save them in your archive, bring them back up for when you're doing a groundbreaking for a building. You might have an event in that building that you can show why it needed to have a renovation or be redone. So there's many, many benefits to the hybrid. But with hybrid, with the benefits also come our challenges. Can we talk about those for a moment? Again, let's go back into Minty and start talking about some of the challenges you foresee. We've added some of that we think are the most challenging that we see most on campuses. So we're just going to have you put those kind of in order and where you think the challenges lay. Staffing, yep. Not having the right vendors or platforms. Lack of understanding of what a hybrid event is. That's kind of where I think we all started at, trying to figure out what that is. Budget is the number one thing. And when you're trying to use the bigger platforms, they require a lot more money. And when you're trying to do a virtual event on your own in Zoom, you don't have the staffing. So all of these challenges kind of tie in together, definitely. There's also the challenge of the unknown. Like, we're not sure what's going to happen with the virtual. What if your speaker all of a sudden connection line goes away and now he's not there to talk? What do you do in those things? So there's a lot of planning that has to go in. So before with challenges, we kind of, oh, well, we know that might happen. We can kind of plan. But with hybrid events, you really need to plan for all of the challenges that may lay ahead of you so that you can be ready for them. So as we see, those are just some more of the challenges that we do see with hybrid events. The complexity of the event production is way beyond what we used to do with just in-person events. The event goal for the hybrid, it may or may not be the right choice for your event. So again, you want to stick with the event goal. I apologize, I messed that up, but your event goal is your purpose on helping decide if you would like to do a hybrid event or not, and if it's right for you.
And you might need somebody to unmute your mic. But if you've decided that hybrid is the right kind of event for you, we just outlined some things to consider. And, you know, if you have extra things that you think are really important that you want to share in the chat, please feel free to go ahead and do so. But what did you learn creating when you were creating an experience as part of a virtual event that could really enhance your in-person offerings? Is hybrid going to be right for some of your programs moving forward? And if it is, how can you advocate for staff training? There might be some people on your team that really are rock stars in being able to use a software platform, or they might be great with graphics, or they might be good with videos. And so are there some basic trainings or some professional development opportunities for those team members that you can invest in so they can become your platform guru and really help with those events where you are unable to and you don't have a budget to bring in an AV company. And likewise, are there departments on campus that you can really partner with to help you script out the event so it becomes that kind of engaging broadcast style hybrid event with the visual content? Can you work with your teams on design elements, your communications teams? Do you have a TV station? Really use your on-campus resources for collaboration. We find at UC San Diego that often two event leads working in concert works really nicely. And in this instance, you can both be singing from the same hymn sheet, but one person is executing the in-person portion and one person is really driving that virtual experience. Maybe you don't need to hold the in-person and virtual portions of your event at the same time. You know, a semi-live session could be that you have the live portion of the event, you pre-record the content, and then at a later date or time, you could play that pre-recorded session back to your online audience and have a moderator or host be there live to facilitate that conversation with them so they get a very, very similar experience. Virtual experience mapping, so really thinking about what's that journey from registration to the event that your hybrid attendees and especially your virtual attendees are experiencing, and are they really getting a great experience from that you've laid out? One of my favorites personally is hiring the right team, and especially someone like a show caller who can really ensure your in-person and virtual production are in sync. Or maybe it's a virtual MC that could really shepherd the crew and the attendees that are there online and help facilitate the networking portions. Or maybe they take the virtual attendee between sessions and they're not necessarily hearing everything from the in-person attendees. So these are just a few of the things that we thought about. I'm sure you have many more. And of course, with this, there are many more new budget items to consider. And it's kind of fun for me to think about what are some of the ways in which we can think about how we spend our production dollars differently to benefit these different audiences. So I think that's enough of our presentation because we have so many people to hear from. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ellie Fergon, who is going to take a deeper dive into a case study of a hybrid event that she recently produced.
Just a quick housekeeping. If you have any questions or comments, we ask that you use the question and answer. Chat is disabled, so go ahead and send them into question and answers, and we'll make sure it gets answered in a timely manner for you or get you to the right person for your question. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jessica and Liz. That was a super fun presentation, and I will say a little bit hard to follow, but thanks you guys for being here. As we mentioned, we decided at CSUB to attempt our first hybrid meeting just last month in June. It took place on June 16th, and it was for our quarterly foundation board meeting, probably something that many of you guys also organize. This meeting took place in our renovated location on campus that our department, the Office of Events, manages. It typically fit this one room, about 50 guests, but per our restrictions on campus, we were able to seat 25 out of 50% capacity, obviously social distanced. The chairman of the board, along with the president of the university, decided to pursue a hybrid meeting approach for the last meeting of his term. We still required guests to wear masks and social distance, as well as register, not allowing food or beverage inside the meeting room. We had, as I mentioned, 25 board members inside. We had 6 board members that did not attend in person and chose to attend virtually, and about 35 additional guests who were also on that Zoom virtual. So, as they both mentioned earlier, a hybrid event or meeting contains 2 major components, virtual and in person. Just as we recall from over a year of virtual events, we made sure to plan to have as many internal staff members help with this meeting. We use Zoom as our platform, so we had a Zoom security staff member from our IT department, advancement staff member who managed a virtual Q&A, a Zoom technician to monitor the virtual meeting and address any unforeseen issues, And lastly, this meeting was open to the public, so we wanted to make sure that we did have an in-person overflow room for virtual viewing. That way, if we reach capacity of our 25, we had the space for non-board members to stick around and participate in the meeting. The last thing we wanted to do was kick somebody out. The in-person location, which you can see below in the photo, had social distance seating, which we did require in advance. Board members were notified that we were requiring an RSVP for all in-person attendance. We are still requiring face masks on campus universally, so we made sure to not only communicate that to all our guests, but also provide extra on-site, something we thought would be very important. We decided that we did not have enough cameras and experience in live streaming this meeting in this particular space, so we hired a local audio and visual company that supported all of our needs. Through this hybrid meeting, we were able to advocate for this building to add an additional AV equipment for more hybrid style meetings and events in the future. And lastly, communicate, over communicate all of these needs and plans from the start to communicating to the guests, both virtually and in person, and what to expect. In addition to that, we also communicated very openly with the chairman, my vice president, and our president of all of these needs, that this wasn't going to be an easy thing, to make sure they were fully on board. Now, the why. Again, to Jessica's point, this is the question we have asked ourselves all year long with even planning virtual events. Understand the purpose and goal of your event or meeting before you decide to use the hybrid event platform. It's very important that not only you understand this, but it's reciprocated across the planning. Our goal for this final board meeting of the year was to have a more intimate meeting with our chairman, again, who was planning his last meeting of the term, welcoming in the new chair. Having the meeting in person was more valuable than the higher costs associated with it. In addition, a board member offered to have an off-campus gathering for those interested in socializing post-meeting. So we did have some tips and tricks that we want to share with you guys. First of all, practice makes perfect. Overschedule your rehearsals and run-throughs as you are planning. Make sure that all involved understand the importance of these rehearsals and why they need to be involved. Even if someone's just standing around, not knowing their role, they're there, they're listening, and their role will be defined. Make sure that you're scheduling all of those in advance to the best of your ability. The production schedule or schedules. Each area of the in-person and virtual need their own production schedule. Make sure they know their role and who they are working with and when, using correct terminology from the technicians and the team. I had to ask many times, what do you want this to be called? What do you want to look down on your production schedule and see so that you immediately understand that? I didn't always get that from a technician standpoint, but I made sure to capture that and give that to them and exactly what they need. Signage and communication. Be consistent with your communication and what guests can expect before the meeting or event, upon arrival, during the meeting, and even after. Don't forget that guests may be a part of other businesses or organizations that do not align with your institution's rules or restrictions. Along with signage, if you have the staff available, station them at multiple entrances or parking areas to welcome and assist guests. Remember, even as we enter the fall semester, people have not been at events, especially your institution. Be mindful of everybody coming from a different part of their own life. And lastly, gifts. Who doesn't like gifts? Gifts are a great way to thank the in-person guests for their time and commitment to your institute, as well as the virtual guests. If they're, say, a board member and they should receive the same item, thank them for participating and being a part of your event or meeting. We wanted to give our board members something special for their year of support, as well as thanking them for attending. In addition, we did send those board members who attended virtually the same gift. And some do's and don'ts. These are some points to remember as we begin pivoting from virtual to both hybrid and back to in-person meetings and events. To highlight a few, do understand the goal and purpose of the event or meeting. I'll reiterate this again. Why are you doing this event, and why does hybrid work best to achieve that goal? And maybe when you're asking that question, you'll realize that hybrid may or may not work best, but going through those steps is critical. Schedule, both for production and rehearsal. Have a backup plan for your virtual audience. Do make sure they have a good experience if something happens and they get kicked off. Make sure they have all of the materials and feel very welcome. And understand all policies and restrictions for your in-person venue. whether that's your own institution or an off-campus location. Make sure everyone behind the scenes especially knows all those policies. And some specific don'ts you do not want to forget. Do not rush your hybrid planning. We'll hear from some industry professionals in a minute who will provide insight into that planning. Do not try to replicate an in-person activity. This is so important and something we learned early on with virtual planning. The virtual event, although it may be the same event as the year prior, is not the same planning. It doesn't require the same tools. So take this as a whole new idea to maybe an annual event. Do not forget about special accommodations and accessibility for all your guests. We'll hear from someone else from Cal State LA later on in the session about accessibility with hybrid events. And do not be afraid to over communicate. Lastly, don't assume any of your guests' comfort levels as they either return to in-person or virtual part of your meeting or event. So we did learn a lot with our first hybrid meeting, and I will say I'm excited to do more of them. First of all, we learned that hybrid meetings and events are more complicated. It just is. You have two events that you're planning, a virtual event and an in-person event. We learned that it's very important to have a lead from the start through the execution. If that lead should change, make sure everybody involved knows who their director is, who they should report to, and who's making those last minute decisions if you need to. That lead should manage all the moving parts of the event. That means we had one lead who heard from each area: technology, Zoom, the check-in, the speakers. And lastly, I don't think I even need to say this, as event professionals, we know that we have to be flexible. We are the best problem solvers. So don't forget that as you make this shift to some hybrid meetings and events, to be flexible. And lastly, what's next for us? So glad you asked. Well, we're still figuring that out, as most of you are as well, I'm sure. CSUB plans to begin in-person events at the start of the fall semester with universal masking and lower indoor capacity to allow for social distancing. This past year, we celebrated 50 years at Cal State Bakersfield, and we're now in the beginning phase of planning our anniversary finale event on October 1st with a limited in-person audience. Our goal and our reason why is to host a live stream event in real time on a local network, as well as streaming to YouTube and Facebook, so that we can reach a much higher audience. We can focus on our internal audience, making sure that those are the people we want there, while still giving everybody the opportunity to view. Our goal is to close out the anniversary year with our top supporters and community members. I'd love to share our live stream information with you all as we get closer, so you can also enjoy part of our hybrid event on October 1st. But now I'd like to take this chance to hear from you all. So if you want to hop back on your Menti, on your tablet or your phone, and answer the next question to the best of your ability. What portion of your events this year do you anticipate will be hybrid? And I know this is tricky because, we're still learning what that means. But hopefully we've all had a chance to review some of these events that we normally have, how they worked out virtually if you did them last year in a virtual setting, and what your goal is. Maybe this session will change some of your insight into what that event looks like or meeting looks like in the near future. So it looks like we're kind of split on very few and some. So again, it was nice to speak here with you all, and thanks for taking the time to listen to the CSUB case study and participate in this poll. I'll pass it back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Ellie. That was a great case study. Thanks for sharing with us, and congratulations on a successful hybrid event. Again, this event itself is also hybrid. It's a live case study as we're going through it. Before we move on, though, the big point is that there is no one definition for hybrid. It is simply another opportunity for connecting and engaging with our guests, our donors, our alumni, our students, especially, and in as many ways as possible. However, there are different paths to take depending on your goals and capabilities, as mentioned. With that in mind, let's now dive deeper still, starting with Andrew Pearson, Chief Marketing Officer from Socio, and Andrew has some exciting news for us today as well, along with this presentation. Socio is an online event platform that you can utilize especially for your larger hybrid events. Take it away, Andrew.
Great. Thank you, Paul. It's really fantastic to be here. I've got some slides that I'll pull up in just a moment, but I've had a long career in events. Got my start with a national student environmental conference back in my sophomore year, and I was blown away. It was so exciting, but also I learned a lot, and I realized that events was probably going to be part of my future, and as it is today. So as Chief Marketing Officer of Socio, I'm really kind of living my dream career right now, and we're really proud to sponsor this event. As I pull up my slides, I've got some fun news to share. So let me just get in presentation mode here for you. And Paul, if for some reason this is not showing for the audience, just let me know. But yeah, this is a great event. And I also just want to say, for those of you attending, I mean, you really are at the cutting edge of the transformation that is going on in the entire event industry. The world is going hybrid, work is going hybrid, meetings are going hybrid, events are going hybrid. The virtual component was obviously accelerated and to a degree forced upon us by the pandemic, but it's just opened up such a huge window of how event organizers, meeting planners, and the world at large can utilize technology to make these interactions more inclusive and reach a broader audience. So as Paul mentioned, we're an end-to-end event management platform. We can support virtual, hybrid, and in-person events. But we've got some big news today. We actually were just acquired by Cisco. So today is the official first day where Socio is now part of Cisco and specifically part of the WebEx suite, which means that we now have a full set of offerings that cover both meeting software and events, live, in person, and hybrid. So really, really exciting stuff for us. You'll see me if I take a sip, I'll either be drinking out of my Socio cup or my Cisco mug right here. So today is truly a hybrid day for us as well. And my presentation today is really about some hybrid event case studies and some insights. So let's dive in. I'll try to go really fast. Hybrid events, when you think about it, there's just a lot that kind of comes up, right? You have two different audiences, not just the attendees, but also speakers and sponsors that you need to accommodate through two different experiences. You actually technically have two venues, right? The screen that many of your virtual attendees are using and the in-person venue. And you need to think about Q&A, polls, networking, what platform you're using, AV production, and more. I think of a hybrid event, really a true hybrid event is sort of a fully integrated in-person and virtual event where all your audiences are able to interact kind of within one venue, right? The virtual and in-person, but it's a fully interactive and immersive experience. But you'll see some organizations as they ease their way into hybrid, they may sort of say, well, we're going to do the virtual component prior to the in-person and not actually have as much overlap. And that's okay, right? Hybrid is sort of evolving and the definitions have some nuance to them. There are a lot of benefits to hybrid events. We see increased ROI for event organizers. So if you're charging for tickets or sponsorships, you suddenly can have a much more expanded audience, right? Not everybody can always make the day that you plan the in-person event or travel. And especially in today's times with all the safety considerations and concerns around the pandemic, not everybody is able to join in person. There's higher sponsorship value. So quite frankly, if you have sponsors, setting up a booth or attending on site, giving presentations there, but also able to staff a virtual booth or interact via chat or have banners and games and polls, you really actually expand kind of the value for them as well and their ability to interact. And there's also a lot more data collection once you add a virtual component, right? Your in-person attendees as well as your virtual attendees are actually interacting with polls and things like we see tools like Menti. They're chatting, they're visiting sponsor booths, they're networking with each other, and a virtual event platform like Socio will actually help you see all of that and really understand exactly how people are engaging with the event. So I've got two case studies. The first is from a hybrid event that was conducted by the National Speakers Association, a Socio customer back in February. They were one of the first movers into this. They basically support professional speakers and are really always at the cutting edge of how to kind of facilitate what's new in events. And their event was called the Winter Workshop 2021. So this was just a kind of a screenshot from within the Socio app, what a virtual attendee would see. And you can see the MC on stage and a virtual presenter and kind of a prompted question that's popping up there. Here's just another screen that showcases different ways that they leverage the platform. So you have your MCs kind of live on stage. They're kind of a panned out camera. And then you've got these 4 virtual presenters. They did some cool things though, right? Like they would have kind of thematic background elements that they would introduce during different sessions so that it kind of ties together all these virtual presenters who are joining from all over the world. This is their MC, so they actually hired professional MCs. And one cool thing they did is during times when the virtual event, or sorry, the in-person event was still being set up, they actually created some virtual content to kind of walk the virtual audience through kind of what was happening. Like, hey, we're setting up the stage, here's where this is, here's what the in-person attendees are going to see. So they did a tour, and that was kind of really fun. They also actually put a camera in their speaker waiting room. I thought this was really neat. So they would kind of cut to the speaker who is behind the stage, behind the curtains, and they could even kind of pull them in, their audio in, and facilitate some fun interaction there. One thing I've learned through hybrid events is that your virtual audience actually kind of craves to see a little bit more behind the curtain, right? They want to know what's going on. It kind of helps them feel more connected, more involved. And it's also kind of fun for the in-person attendees as well. You can also see here, it prompts a lot of fun chats and a lot of other information that you can pack into that event experience. Okay, they leveraged our speaker and sponsor kind of portal to be able to showcase speakers. One learning that we've had is rather than use time in the session to kind of read over the biography and do full introductions, a lot of organizers are just leveraging kind of these speaker profiles to give folks a lot of information up front by granting access to an event app prior to the event. Obviously folks can kind of read, they can check out the speakers as they're talking, and it allows the speakers to really focus on the content and not kind of have to waste a lot of time with background information. Now, sometimes there's content that you need to deliver for your in-person audience, and it's just not quite relevant for your virtual attendees. So in this case, all the safety precautions, kind of the walkthrough of the rules of the road, expectations, weren't necessarily that pertinent to somebody who's watching from their living room couch on their laptop, who doesn't have to wear a mask. And so they tried to make it fun, right? They put their MC in a bubble during this part of the presentation. They facilitating questions between an in-person audience, but also making it possible for virtual attendees to ask questions. So whether everyone is using a Q&A tool or the chat, or perhaps you're able to mic, and convey the audio from your in-person questioners and allow the virtual audience to use the Q&A tool. Like, there's a lot of different options, but give some thought to that. And don't be afraid to introduce entertainment, right? Like the fun things that you can kind of introduce to lighten up things, in between presentations, especially if it's a longer day, right? It's great to give people something kind of fun to watch, both at home and in person. So here they had jugglers, they had acrobats, all kinds of fun. And this is just a little bit of a pre-event kind of, just to give you a little bit of insight into what the format looked like. You can see here the MC on stage. They've got a comfort monitor below. I'll talk more about that. And then they've got a further back monitor that actually gives them some prompts as to where they are in the agenda, when they need to introduce virtual panelists, and so on. And then here's a view from an attendee at the table, right? So the tables were stationed, relatively far apart, prioritizing safe and social distancing. But an in-person attendee can get that virtual experience too, and that allows them to participate in chat, answer polls, whether on their laptop or their mobile device. And here's actually another fun thing that they did. They leveraged Socio's video rooms to enable kind of breakout sessions and small group discussions between their virtual attendees. But what they found is that a lot of the in-person attendees also wanted to join those video rooms. So video rooms, breakout sessions can be great ways to facilitate interaction between all of your attendees, right? Sometimes your in-person folks may want to congregate and have kind of more of a live discussion. That's okay. But allowing everybody to access the video room tool is a great way to bring those two audiences together. And if you want to get inspired, NSA actually has a hybrid event coming up in July, also run on Socio. So check out their website. It's called Influence 2021. I might give you some ideas of the kind of industry, how the industry is approaching hybrid events right now. So the next case study I want to dive into is actually our own hybrid event, which we did in May 2021. We facilitated an audience of about 2,000 virtual attendees and 50 folks in person. It was called When Virtual Meets in Person, a hybrid webinar about hybrid event success. And this is what it looked like. So here's kind of our stage. Myself and another MC introduce some in-person speakers. And then you can see on the screen next to me, we've also got some virtual panelists that we're pulling up. And that way the in-person audience can both see sort of the live presenters and your virtual panelists as we're kind of flipping back and forth between cameras. We, of course, have a big display behind us. You don't want to make that too busy, though, because you know, if you have a lot of text on there, might work well for your in-person audience, but remember on a smaller screen, you may just end up like a big word right behind a speaker's head. So be conscious of what's showing up if you use a display behind the speakers. And here's, of course, what the audience might see on their virtual display. Okay. And this is kind of how we set up the in-person audience, as much social distancing as we could, mask required, by some folks sort of on the floor and then kind of stadium style speaking. But we also had overflow. Prior speaker mentioned this is a great way if you just can't fit everybody in person, reserve some other rooms, right? And they can actually attend virtually, but still be part of some of those in-person networking opportunities. We also use this for video rooms. So you can actually create sort of breakout spaces, in-person spaces where your in-person attendees can join a video room with, you know, maybe a dozen other virtual attendees too. And this is just an example of how live display can be used for your in-person audience, right? Kind of give a full screen to kind of rotate through things like game challenges and the leaderboard, poll results, and other announcements. And of course, your virtual audience is going to be able to see that too as a feature in their platform. We also did a behind the scenes walkthrough, especially for newer hybrid events, right? Folks really appreciate seeing this. Hopefully this will be useful for this audience. And I think a little teaser here, we may have something coming up in the next part of this agenda. But Kara here, you can see she's actually holding up her mobile phone, which we use as a camera for this thing. So you can use small devices as one of your video feeds, for example. And we did a walkthrough. So our AV technician walked us through the comfort monitor, which you see here, and that helps the in-person MCs and panelists kind of keep track of what's going on. There's a display in the back, which helps us see exactly what the virtual audience is seeing. So which speakers, which camera views are showing up. Here's an example of a camera that's actually for audience shots. We wanted to pull in reactions from our in-person audience as part of the overall view. And again, these are the two cameras that we had set up for this event that could allow us to jump between close-ups of each speaker if we had two or more speakers on stage, or have one that showed kind of a full panel view and the others for individual shots. Super helpful for hybrid events, in particular to map it out, just like you would for a normal in-person event. So here is sort of the floor plan that we use to start our planning process once we have the venue locked in. Actually, at this moment, I want to jump in. I've just got a couple minutes left. I want to show you a few examples. So this is what the actual event, our hybrid event, looked like in the Socio app. We've actually got all the recordings of that event up here. This is on demand, so you all can access it yourself. We had a great game, which can really fun way for people to hunt for codes and kind of see themselves on the leaderboard and win prizes. Of course, a way to showcase your sponsors and then speakers. The social wall can be fun because it allows virtual and in-person attendees to kind of share different things, right? In-person attendees can share photos so that your virtual audience can kind of see a little bit more from your audience view. Of course, we have surveys, polls that we ran, including some that we populated pre-event, ways for people to network with each other, which is very, very popular. Ways to book a demo and so on. And then this is what the back end of our platform looks like, where you can see all these great metrics. It's very drag and drop to build the event. Just like I mentioned earlier, data collection is huge for all events, but particularly for hybrid, and allows you to see who's participating, who's networking, which features are getting used the most, who's watching recordings, who's playing the game, who's visiting your sponsor booths, and so on. So. With that, I just want to flag, if you go to our website, socio.events/events, go down to our on-demand, you'll see ways to access that content. And of course, you can register. This actually is our own registration platform and landing page. So there's a free code for you to get in there and access all that content. Want to give one other mention too, a very, very important tool for hybrid events. And the CSU team here has a fantastic run of show themselves. We kind of use a Google Sheet. And this way, everybody from your AV and production, your MCs, your speakers can all be aligned around timing, who's speaking, who's going to be on camera, right? Your in-person versus remote. What shots you're looking for, and if there are any kind of cues for the camera team, if there are banners or overlays that your technicians need to bring up, like polls or other things. And so highly encourage you to kind of build out that run of show. Another tool that we found very, very useful, and I need to get, excuse me one second, there you go. Is a kind of shared Google Doc. And this is very useful for speakers and MCs and also technicians to be able to kind of give you notes, right? Real time, pull in questions from the audience if you need to, instructions. It's kind of where your script and your prompts all lie together. It's great for everybody to align around kind of messaging. Obviously, rehearse, repeat. You don't want to be reading from this fully, but it's also kind of a crutch if if you need to refer back to things. And as I mentioned earlier, our NSA case study is actually on the website, so you can read more about what they did and download a full hybrid event guide through the site. It's about 50 pages, so a lot of good material here. I'm not going to go and show you everything now, but we do have some other fun events coming up. So in July 21st, just 2 weeks from now, we've got a virtual event all about fun and engagement techniques, both at in-person, virtual, and hybrid events. And of course, you can check out Socio and learn more about us. I do actually have a really kind of fun, and I'll just bring up that next slide. We're almost done here. We've got a really fun kind of way for you to interact with our team. I want to just share a couple lessons and highlights real quick. Make sure hybrid is strategic, right? It should be a choice. Not every event needs to be hybrid, and you really need to think about why and how. Definitely need to solve for AV production. It's one of the hardest but most important pieces of going hybrid. And having that production schedule, that shot clock is really useful. Your virtual component doesn't just have to be during the in-person event as well. Like it can be pre or post, and that allows everybody to sort of engage and learn the platform, kind of provide you with some pre-event information or take advantage of post-event content. Definitely need to prioritize safety for in-person, but also accessibility for your broad audience. So Socio, we're proud of this. We make inclusivity a really big part of our platform. We have closed captions, translation, you introduce sign language as one of your speaker windows, and more. Think like a TV producer, right? Your in-person speakers need to be talking to the camera as well as your audience, right? And so thinking like a TV producer helps you understand that dynamic. Hybrid speaking is different, right? For many of those reasons, you need to be able to figure out how you blend that virtual presenter with your in-person group. And MCing is also different, just like Q&A. And so weaving that together, making sure your MC can pay attention to the virtual conversation as well as in person. Event tech like Socio can support all of that. But you got to leave more time for planning. I was surprised, but whatever you think you need for an in-person event, add like 2 or 3 weeks for a hybrid one, right? Probably is going to take you 20 to 50% more time. So really just bake that in, especially if it's your first one. And like I mentioned, you're welcome to download our hybrid event guide, but we also have a special code for our attendees here. So if you go to socio.events/CSU, request a demo, we'll give you special pricing. We're a very friendly sales team. So whether or not you choose Socio or you need us anytime soon, it's also a great way just to learn more about the kind of features that are useful for a hybrid event. With that, I really appreciate your time. And Paul, I'll turn it back to you if there's any questions or notes. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Andrew. Socio is a fun and interactive platform. I actually attended their hybrid event that he was referencing, and that was tons of fun. If you have any questions for Andrew, I don't see anything in the Q&A yet. His contact information is in the chat. And he's going to be running off to a meeting with Cisco in a few minutes, and not sure if he's going to be able to come back for our Q&A panel later on. So definitely contact him for more information about Socio. And thank you again, Andrew. And now the question is what considerations you need to make regarding hybrid events truly accessible. And I'm pleased to present Leon McNaught ATI programmer at Cal State LA. Hi, Leon.
Thanks, Paul. As you know, we've all been sort of thrown into the online and event hybrid space over the last year. So the stakes for accessibility have never been higher. So let me just show a few slides here on things to keep in mind as event planners when you're deciding about what platforms to adopt and what kind of considerations you have to use for accessibility. So really, accessibility is all about equal access. It's really making sure that the event that we're producing, the platforms that we're using, the technology, all of the materials are available to everybody, regardless of disability. They wouldn't require any specific abilities to interact if it's truly accessible. And all users will get the same core functions, regardless of where they're coming from or how they're accessing our platform or event. So that's really what we're talking about, is just equal access. When we think about event platforms and hybrid and online events, from an accessible procurement perspective, we're thinking about a high impact acquisition. So we're going to have lots of people interacting with this platform. It's going to be students, could be the public, very high impact platforms that will get a lot of use and exposure. So when you're deciding on a platform, when you're using your additional visual aids and your digital content and your other plugins for interactivity, you really want to think about accessibility from the very beginning. It's really important to think accessibility before you get into an acquisition, before you sign on the dotted line, so to speak. It really pays off to do just a little bit of due diligence as the requester for these platforms. Obviously, your accessibility professionals on campus, your procurement department, and probably IT are going to help with a lot of this. But as an event professional, it really does help to just have a little bit of information about what you need to think about when it comes to accessibility. And the way to think about it is accessibility should be a must-have feature of your event platform. So if you end up choosing something that is completely inaccessible, the container, as in, interacting with the various dialogues and moving through it, then you're going to be in a really difficult place as you progress through your event. So ask the vendor for their documentation. We have these industry standard VPATs, Voluntary Product Accessibility Templates, also known as ACR. So when a VPAT is filled out for a specific platform, such as Socio or marching orders, it becomes known as an accessibility conformance report. If barriers exist, then the vendor will identify those in a good VPAT, and they should also have a roadmap or a timeline for the remediation of those barriers. This documentation is pretty essential to make sure that you have the right information when you need to come up with alternatives or different ways for people to access your event that may be affected by any accessibility barriers. We'll get into that a little bit later. That's what we call an equally effective alternate access plan. And if maybe not so much with our virtual events, but do keep in mind things like information security. If your event involves any sort of personal identifiable information, ask for a hit back. But the thing is, you want to think of accessibility as a feature and, part of your needs when you're selecting a platform, and make sure that, you have the highest level of accessibility with the most features that you need, and that you have a vendor who's responsive to your questions about accessibility as well. That's very important. The other part that you have to keep in mind is not only the event platform itself, but also the content within that event platform. Think about your captioning for your presenters. Think about if you're showing videos, those should be pre-captioned. If you're using external software for interactive polls. Check the accessibility of those, make sure that those websites are accessible to everyone. Try and make sure that speakers identify themselves, and if they're using visual aids to sort of describe the main information that's being dynamically generated on the screen, so that individuals who are attending your presentation can get that dynamic information on the fly. And your documentation, your digital content handouts, if you're using PDF documents, Word documents, presentation slides, especially if they're distributed to the audience, you'll want to make sure that they also follow accessibility best practices. And again, these are just things for you to think about, and you can talk to your accessibility professionals on your campus, and they should be able to guide you in the best practices or assist you with this information. And finally, think about the accessibility of your advertising, your websites, your social media posts. Those are all important things as well as part of this accessible package. So a quick checklist is, get that documentation when you're thinking about, product acquisition. Ask the vendor at the very beginning. Make sure you communicate with the vendor the expectations about accessibility and how it's very important for us as state institutions to follow the practices of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I do have a link here to a vendor requirements page that we have on the Cal State LA accessibility website. I can paste that in the chat later. It's calstatela.edu/accessibility/vendor-requirements. And what that does is it lays everything out for the vendor. And these are taken from the CSU standards that we have across all institutions, all 23 campuses. It lays everything out for the vendor, what's expected for the documentation, what kind of information we need, and what are the important points that they should be thinking about while we're going through these acquisitions. You may have to ask for a product demonstration if you're a little unsure how all of this fits in. You probably, again, as event professionals, you're going to have a little bit of knowledge about accessibility. You need to know it's important, but you're probably going to want to have a product demo. You might want to invite your campus stakeholders, your accessibility and IT, and maybe even your office to services the students with disabilities to check the product and make sure that it's something that's going to fit on your campus. And all this comes so that we can arrange alternatives if required. We want to make sure that we have all this information up front and that the scope doesn't creep and, we spend a lot of time on all these alternatives. If we know everything up front, it's just a much smoother process. And I think as Ellie mentioned earlier, flexibility is one of those big things for event professionals. And, finally, we want to encourage inclusivity. So, it pays dividends to just be upfront, be transparent, ask your audience if they need a special accommodation to participate, to please contact you prior to the event. Be proactive, and if you're thinking about accessibility proactively from the entire process, then you'll be well positioned to provide individual accommodations through your campus stakeholders. Now, most products do have some accessibility barriers. That's pretty common. What we're looking for are products that don't have, a severe barrier that would affect the core functionality of the product. So when you have a product that is inaccessible, it's just really important that your vendor is cooperative and collaborative, and that, if it's a contract, that you're working with your procurement department to make sure that there are accessibility deliverables included in the contract language. You don't want to go on the word. I think we all know that there's sales and then there's the actual product, right? So a good sales team will get you pumped up about something, and then when you have the product, that's what you're stuck with for a while. And an equally effective alternate access plan. This is something that's very important. If we have barriers to users, we want to think about alternatives for those specific users and what will we enact so that they can get the same core functionality or the same information in a different way. And our equally effective alternate access plan is really a pre-plan for our institution. It's like our due diligence. And, it's very specific. It talks about the product, what the issues are, who it may affect, and what would be a workaround for those people that may have experienced that barrier. And who we name people, we name resources, staff positions in a good EAP to make sure that it's just very clear what needs to happen if somebody needs that sort of access. And at the renewal of your product or service, whether it's annually or if it's every few years for a contract, you'll want to check the vendor progress if there are significant accessibility barriers, and just make sure that progress is being made. So this last slide here, just some verbiage about things to keep in mind as event professionals, the things that you're going to be asking for about accessibility. We have our VPATs, also known as ACR, a roadmap from the vendor that shows remediation timelines, EAPs, equally effective alternate access plans. That's something that you create as a CSU institution. HECVAT, if it's information security. Accessibility statement. If there are known accessibility issues on a platform, then an accessibility statement will give those in advance, and that's posted somewhere that the users will find out about it, so that they may be able to make accommodations themselves to avoid those barriers. And then finally, an accommodation statement to invite people to ask if they need assistance whenever your event is going live. So I hope you found that information to be helpful. I know it's a lot of information and it's not the speciality of the event professionals, but it's very, very important to keep accessibility in mind as you're planning these big, high impact hybrid and online events. With that, I'll hand it back to Paul.
Thank you, Leon. Thanks for sharing all that important and very helpful information indeed. So thanks again. And I did put that link that you mentioned in the chat, as well as your contact information. And now for some behind the scenes part of the program. I'm ready to geek out, are you? Please welcome Paul Tisa, owner and production manager of Metro Media Productions. Take it away, Paul.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you what it's like to produce a hybrid event from a production standpoint. I'm a production manager, and the point of view I want to review with you is from and build on the previous presentations, how I look at the hybrid event, how I look at producing a hybrid event, and what's critical to me. I'll do a quick introduction about Metro Media, what we've done, what we've done, and then talk about the production planning for hybrid events and the key components that are involved in that, why I focus on program and script as being primary, and then a little bit about the studio meeting space and understanding some capability there around technology. And then real quick, give you some costs of breakdown for small, medium, and large hybrid events that would typically maybe take place on campus. So let me advance slides here. All right, so Metro Media. So we've been in business for 16 years, just like many of the small outside production companies you've probably worked with in your local environments. We have a full-time staff of about 12 people. And just like everybody else, we had to make a transition from 2020 to 2021 and to supporting virtual events and turn our live experience into a virtual experience. We're very lucky to be able to maintain our full staff that entire time, and with our help of our customers, survive the COVID like many other companies, and obviously like many of you in your campuses. So during that time, we had the opportunity to work with many host platforms like Socia, Whova, Hopin, and Cvent, implement those platforms for our customers and go through the decision cycle about what platforms were best for their event and review those features. As well as look at the what I typically would call just like a meeting platform like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, and WebEx as well. So we've been in all of them. Most of our experience has been in Zoom, and have enjoyed our success in that. So real quick, I want to showcase a couple of live events and what we've done in the past. This is, and many of you are familiar with producing live events of this caliber, where you have a lot of AV, a lot of production, a lot of detailing that goes into producing these events. And then I want to showcase a little bit here of what we've done in terms of producing virtual events. All these are Zoom events, by the way, where we do custom branding, lower thirds, sidebar content. And the idea of showing you these two different photos between the live and the virtual is to emphasize the time it takes. It's the same between the two. you're going to spend as much time planning a live event as you are going to do the hybrid or virtual event. And to really give you that time, that time that Ellie talked about, Andrew talked about, and Leon talked about in terms of assessing the program and developing it. All right, so moving on, when it comes to production planning, there are a couple key components that I always focus on as a production manager. And the most critical part are where we win and lose a show, win and lose an event, are in the pre-production or rehearsal time. So everything we do as a production manager is to really focus in on the program, how it builds out, how we're planning for it, and getting ready for that rehearsal time. And then that makes everything else easier. So you win and lose what we often say in production. Well, I win and lose a show by prepping in the warehouse. And same thing on the event planning side. So next big thing I do as a production manager is I focus in on the event program and the script detailing. I'll take your agenda and I'm going to detail every cue, every line item into a script like Andrew showed you in his presentation, and I really focus in on that. From that, I'm able to pull what I need for your live and virtual production, what technology I need to deploy, what I need to use, and what solutions I need to come up with, as well as the studio or event design as well. I can pull a lot of that information for your event script. So what I'm looking at as a production manager, the very first thing I want to tackle is your script, your program and your agenda, so I can start working with that, developing it, and know what technology I need to make your show happen. Oops, sorry about that. So when it comes to talking about the program and script, so there's a couple key things I want to review with you on that I'm going to be looking for. And so if you have any opportunity to hand over that script to me, that's what we're going to do. Ideally, it's through like a Google Docs where we can all share and edit it together. What I'm going to do with that script, I'm going to break down every agenda item into a Zoom command or a Zoom queue and a content queue. So promote this person, spotlight this person, share this video, and run this engagement Q&A. And I'm going to do that line by line for each and every thing. The next thing I'm going to work with you on is developing a comms plan. How are we going to communicate as a production team? Are we going to use a software like Slack or Discord or ClearCom? So if you've done live events before, you've seen the tech team on live headsets, Slack and Discord and ClearCom IP are virtual ways for you to communicate across the virtual world with your tech team, your stage manager, your speaker logistics manager, and be able to call queues. As a technical director, I may not even be in the same city where my technical crews at, and yet I can call commands using an app like Discord. So recommend coming up with that comms plan fairly quickly so you can manage that and support your event. So the next thing I'm really going to start detailing and focusing on is your moderator and your presenters. And I want to know what they're doing in your script line by line. And so who's presenting in the studio and who is virtual. That's going to be a big thing to figure out and how we're going to support that. And then who's presenting the content, who's in charge of it. So you notice in this presentation, each presenter was presenting their own content and sharing their own screen. In some events, it's better to have the tech crew run that all on their own. In some events, it may be split up. In some ways, the presenter wants to control it. In other ways, times you want the tech to control it. So focusing on that, we're going to put that into the script as well. So types of engagements that are going to be run are going to be in that script and that cue sheet as well. And I'm going to detail it out line by line about what happens there. Who's running the slideshow? Who's running the videos? Are they going off to a web page? Who's going to be running the Q&A and polling and etc.? And that all hits that script. We're going to pay attention to every detail and build that as a cue sheet in the cue sheet. The next thing I'm going to be focused on is the assigned roles that we're all after. So as a technical director or the production manager, my job is to call the show. And I'm going to make those calls to what I call my run a show Zoom host. That's the technician who is basically doing the spotlighting, the promoting, and managing the flow of the webinars for the presenters. And then I have what I usually assign to as my Zoom co-host. And that is the gentleman or the technicians that are running the AV course, basically all the videos, running the engagements, helping run the slides, communicating in the background with speakers and making sure they're on cue, ready to go. So I may need multiple AV co-hosts in that support role. It just depends on how big the program is and what's happening there. And then I'm going to be working with the client on determining engagement leads. A lot of the times, and what I mean here is who's in charge of Q&A. These are obviously questions that you've developed as a, or the client has developed, polls, chat moderation, speaker management. Often those are roles that are handled by the customer and then, or and their staff. So who's in charge of it? I want that in the script. I want to know who's running it, when, and how we're doing it, and detail that all out. So those all get assigned and managed individually. So because these hybrids bring up a particular challenge because we are dealing with both live and virtual event, and you really need to kind of work through how your engagements are going to work. Remember, typically we've all been in this virtual environment where everybody's had chat in front of them. Andrew had a great slide in there where he showed a live event where you had an audience member who had their laptop open, they were logged into the virtual event, and so they could participate in chat. So you need to come up with a solution. How is your virtual audience and your live audience going to engage in some of these features like chat? You don't want to exclude either one. Try to work through the options for both. Slides and videos. So now you have a live audience. How are they going to watch the slides and the videos that are playing? If they don't have laptops to engage, you need to make sure you have some type of presentation media present, and your technology team will help you make that work. And so QA, polling, vote, and hand raising, these are all features that are easy to bring a virtual audience together, but then again, you don't want to divorce your live audience from that engagement as well. And so take a look at third-party solutions like the team here has been implementing Mentimeter, and Slido is another version of that. And then how about voting? If you have to do any sort of voting, there's apps like Election Buddy. These are all applications that help bridge the gap by using smart devices that your live audience may be able to use or access via their laptop. Or again, if their laptop's there, they can all be logged into the Zoom or the WebEx or the MS meeting. And they just need to make sure, for example, they have their audio off so it doesn't create any sort of feedback in the room. You have to think through that, come up with a plan for it, is the goal there. So then the next thing that I want to talk about, oops, sorry. Didn't advance my slides, is the studio meeting space and design. That's the next thing I'm going to be focused on and reading through your script and thinking, how does the studio space need to be organized to maximize the space for your event? And one thing, because many of you are coming from a campus, as an outside production manager coming into your facility, what can I use that's existing in your classroom that I can take advantage of and integrate with? So that'll help you manage your cost controls, and most of your AV providers, if you're going to, will integrate with your AV. We'll have to obviously connect with your IT teams and or your internal AV teams to make sure that integration happens. The next thing I'm going to be looking at is coordinating the multiple presenters you may have in the room. Remember, you're going to have 3 or 4 different presenters, or maybe 2 that are live, and then the rest will be virtual. How are each of these presenters going to operate in this hybrid space? Are they going to operate from a head table, a lectern, or are they going to be seated in their U-shape? Like Paul and Paul here are both located in a U-shape, and we're both presenting separately. Our laptops are on to give us a tight shot of us, and then we have wide robotic cameras to be able to do the full U-shape and a shot of the room from the back. So work through that idea, and obviously because it's a live room, you need to think about where your camera placement, audio, and lighting if it's necessary. So design the space for the audio engagement as well. Don't forget to do that. Remember, you have a live audience and a virtual audience. You want to figure out how they come together and how and what do you want to provide. So in terms of presentation, your live audience needs to see every PowerPoint that's being presented by the virtual presenters plus those locally. And then in terms of your local audience, do you want them to see the virtual audience? Are you going to provide like a gallery view of everybody who's in the meeting so they have some connectivity with the virtual audience, or is that not something you're going to have as a requirement? Then how will the live audience here engage with chat, Q&A, and raised hands like we've talked about before? You need to bridge that gap so both audiences can engage together and figure out a solution. How does that play in your studio space? What kind of monitors do you need in place? Do they need to come with laptops? If they're coming with their laptops or smart devices, are you going to provide power at the tables? What are all the different things you kind of need to think in when you're working on that kind of studio space solution? So in addition, a very important point, we've had to work a lot on this with a lot of our customers, and that's thinking about accessibility for both studio and virtual. So as you transition from virtual to include now kind of a live event space, your accessibility solution now has to include both. So closed captioning needs to be present in the monitors in the meeting space, as well as for the virtual audience as well. Make sure that you work on that solution. Obviously ASL as well. So if you're going to provide an ASL interpreter, where are they? Are they in the studio? Are they virtual? If they're virtual, then you need to provide maybe a monitor here just with a pin of the ASL interpreter, so your hybrid, so your virtual live audiences can participate with the ASL interpreter. And then also think about mobility. So obviously now you're coming into a live environment space. Make sure the room is divine and accessible for mobility impaired people. That's going to be really important in how you're going to address that. Another challenge that comes with hybrid solutions is foreign language support, and we've had to do this a couple times where we have a studio plus a virtual audience. Where are your interpreters? How are your interpreters working with the virtual audience? A meeting platform, a virtual meeting platform like Zoom has a built-in interpretation feature, but remember now you have a live audience that also needs that to be able to hear the translation and then also participate in Q&A through that foreign language support. Obviously, when you go through your agenda, you'll be working through those issues, but hybrid presents us particular challenges when it comes to some of these things. Again, you're in a live space, and so don't forget to think about your live space and designing it for not only for the decor and branding, the look and feel for a live camera shot, but where your media is going to be displayed, cameras, mics, speakers, and the lighting, the whole bit. So we're moving back into live, and spaces are being utilized for live, and that all reduces the space that you have for your audience, and that becomes a factor, especially when we're still working with social distancing guidelines. So don't forget to take a look at that in terms of a total design space for both your both for the AV production that has to happen in that space and the social distancing that you and rules that you and guidelines that you still need to follow. All right, so real quick, I want to talk about some production costs and how we see them happening out there. And these are fairly direct kind of meetings, business oriented, not a lot of kind of decor branding built out, but to have a hybrid meeting space, combine it with a virtual event. And I want to give you some breakdown in costs. These are kind of average costs. They could be higher, they could be lower based on your own market area. Obviously in San Francisco versus Sacramento, if you're producing, there could be a variation in costs. And obviously there could be a variation in cost between what you actually put into your program and what actually has to happen. So this is assuming that you are on campus, or you may need to go to an outside facility, but this is using an outside production company versus thinking about using a hotel AV company, which in essence you could probably add 40 to 60% of the cost on top of the production to be able to figure where they're at. So I define, I'm assuming that internet and power are either part of the facility at your CSUS or at the campus that you're at, or if you're at a venue that you've made arrangements for those. So these costs don't include that, but they are costs that you will incur if you're in an outside facility, obviously. And they can be very expensive. Internet can be, for a virtual conference, can easily be $10,000 to $20,000 to $30,000. Up to 80. I've had bills that are $100,000 for internet production when I'm working with an audience of maybe 2,000 to 3,000 people, and they all need to have Wi-Fi access. And same thing, power costs support a live production event. You know how expensive that can get. It can follow along the same lines when you have a fairly large event. So anyways, for most of these events right now, I'm looking at for small, medium, and large. I'm assuming that they're mainly probably taking place on your campus and that you're hiring an outside production company and you're looking about having an install and rehearsal day, at least one with your production crew, and then a show day, and after the show day, they strike. And so for a small meeting with attendees from 10 to 25 in a meeting space, with I'm thinking that your production cost would be around $1,300 with an audio solution and about $1,400 in labor. That would be for 1 to 2 guys coming in the day before, and then 1 to 2 guys to operate the event, and that's usually in about 25 to 25 square foot space. In the medium-sized space, I'm thinking about 25 to 100 people. Your costs go up a little bit because you're increasing kind of like the presentation media size, maybe going from 50-inch to 70-inch monitors, maybe projection, and then obviously maybe the labor would follow that, and maybe a 60 by 60 space. Large meetings, this is just kind of an area to start the process, because if you have a very large event, this does not capture that cost. But if you're thinking between 100 to 200 people socially distanced in a meeting space with production, a little bit of lighting, projection for the view, the presentation media, and then maybe the virtual audience, and then audio support that. You're probably going to be about 2,300 for production, and then about 2,500 for labor. I've had events that are in October that are booking that are in the San Francisco Marquee Ballroom, and this is on the very, very high end of this, where we're looking at a total budget of around $250,000 for about 15 people in a highly produced studio, so they can start small and get really out of hand, and in terms of what we're doing. Let me just wrap up by showing you what the event space we have here is like. And so what we've done here in this small meeting space is that we have a U-shaped setup, and we anticipated that each of our presenters would come in with their own lap and log in to Zoom and watch the conference that way. We would just ask each one to make sure they had their mic off and their speaker off, because we're providing audio support for both of those. We'd place a mic at each one of the tables, because we're going to take that and we're going to take all those mics and bring it back to one tech location. That will prevent any feedback from happening in the area. That's our goal. And each and everybody, if they were going to participate in the meeting, would participate by looking at their own local laptop monitor. But we also have a presentation monitor at the front of the room called the presentation monitor. Basically, we have a dedicated laptop going to that monitor that's showing every presentation in Zoom. And then we have a gallery view. What we mean by that is that's where our local audience can see all the presenters or anybody attending the meeting, and so there's a little bit of connectivity there. We run that through at the back in a tech location where we have our co-host and host position. So this is the gear, a lot of this gear that you can find at your campus. This is a lot of this, for example, we're running this with 4 laptops, the presentation monitor, the presentation laptop, which is feeding the presentation monitor, our Run-A-Show Zoom host machine, and our AV co-host machine, which is managing the AV, and then the student gallery view. There's 2 50-inch monitors, or a 70 and an 80 here actually. There's 2 robotic cameras here, and then there's audio. A lot of this stuff is built into your studios. A lot of this stuff is built into your campuses already. So it just depends on what you need to support your particular event. So that wraps up my presentation. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it back to Paul.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was really fun for me. I totally enjoy, learning about all that stuff. So thank you for sharing. Please stay on, Paul, if you would. And I want to invite back Leon along with Ellie and Jessica for the Q&A portion of our program. Take it away.
Thank you so much to all of our presenters, and it's been such an informative afternoon, and we truly appreciate it. We do have a few questions and time for questions and answers. If you have any that you would like to if you have any questions for our panelists, please submit them to our Q&A, and we'll make sure they get answered. To start it off, I have a question for Miss Ellie. Can you do a hybrid event with the current resources that most of us have, meaning Zoom or just a laptop? Can you explain on if that you think it's capable of doing so?
Yeah, sure. I think we all kind of touched on this in all of the different areas of today's session, but first and foremost, absolutely. Understand your goal again. You've heard that many times today, but understanding your goal and purpose of your meeting or event is going to help you get into that direction of what you're able to do. But I think it was Socio that mentioned communicate your needs with your with those relationships that you have, and have a candid conversation of, hey, this is what we have. These are our limited resources. We can't necessarily afford this big grandiose production, but help us out. So, having those relationships are going to get you in the right direction of what you can do. And then you'll have a little bit more confidence of if it's just using Zoom, if it's using the existing cameras or microphones in one of your rooms, and knowing what locations on site are available or what off-campus venues you have access to, and what those spaces come with, what you can use that are inside that room or building. So yeah, and definitely, again, to the point of communicating that to your superior, and then you can move forward.
Thank you. Elizabeth or Liz, can you try to give us some examples of pre-show experience and how we can have a free flow or have a pre-show experience for the online folks and for those in person?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen this done many different ways. We have mostly been doing virtual at UC San Diego. And so something really nice we did for the Alumni Awards recently was we did a pre-recording with one of the symphony orchestras. And so as we couldn't all be there in person to celebrate and watch the live music, we did a pre-show element and reception that kicked off the top of the hour with a specially composed performance for this particular event. We had all of the award winners guests in each in a breakout room. And we had this, we had both the host and the musician broadcast to each breakout room. We had a facilitator in each breakout room to kind of give that networking style of conversation. And we had leadership that would jump between and go room to room. And so everything was very heavily scheduled and very carefully mapped out. But it was a really nice kind of fun way to get that experience for our guests and that sort of cocktail reception style feel prior to the award ceremony kicking off.
That's great. And the next question is kind of open for anyone who might be able to add some tricks, but what some of the tips and tricks you might have for ticket pricing when it comes to hybrid events? I know for one thing, when I do pricing, when it comes to hybrid, I kind of see what the audience is going to be getting. I would love to try to do all my events free, but obviously we can't sometimes. So what you want is the experience to be as close as possible for both in person and hybrid. So I try to keep the cost of the ticket price the same. And though I'm not able to give them exactly the same event, I can, if the presenter, if the in-person people are having a booklet full of information, I can send that digitally to my my virtual crowd. So it just depends on the ticket pricing. I do suggest trying to keep it at least the same, or when you are listing the pricing, be very vocal on what your price includes. Let them know so that people can really see the difference in the price and know what they're, quote unquote, paying for. Anybody else have any good tricks?
Yeah, I'll just add, if you have a limited exclusive in-person audience with a ticketed price, make sure that reflects what they're getting, like you were saying, and allow your virtual audience to know and to make that decision. I don't want to pay $100 to attend, but I can sit at home and watch virtually and maybe have a donation component. I'm hearing these fundraising areas and I see people that wanted to pay for that. I see what they're getting. I'm at home. I like this idea. I'm going to donate, $20, or I'm going to donate, and I see what it's going toward, giving people the option and those tiers so that they feel included still, but they can participate at their level. I think it obviously depends on the type of event that you're putting on, but understanding what you want your audiences to feel, especially the difference between virtual and at home. Virtual and in person.
That hybrid term. Thank you. Leon, a question for you. We've talked a lot about accessibility, and there's so much going on and taking place when it comes to accessibility. Can you tell us maybe one or two ways that we can ensure that we account for all of our attendees and their needs?
Well, Jessica, as we mentioned during the presentation, you just like you would check a physical event ahead of your event that you're planning, you also have to check your virtual event platform. So don't be afraid to ask the questions. Make sure you ask the vendor about accessibility up front. Make sure you get your campus stakeholders involved in that, because like I mentioned, CSU event professionals have a lot of other things to deal with. So leave the accessibility to the professionals. As long as you're asking about it and keeping it up front and, in focus, then everything should work out. And, also, ask, like I mentioned on the slides, include an accommodation statement to invite your participants to request individual accommodation should they need it in advance. Just be upfront about it. Make sure they have a way to contact the event planner and ask for additional help or accommodation. And finally, those things that you're going to be using or handing out, presentations, things like that, make sure that it's accessible as well. If you have videos, they're captioned, like Paul was talking about, you may want to have, captions, a sign language interpreter if somebody's asked for that, and make sure your presentations are accessible, and all of your social media and things like that. And if you do those things, don't be afraid. It seems a little daunting because it's a lot to take in and it's a lot of speciality, but if you're just upfront and you're proactive, then it usually works out for the best.
Thank you. The next question I have for Metro Media, if you'd like, what are the top 3 components you believe we need to produce a thoughtful and hybrid event?
From my point of view, it's really about working on that pre-production and that timeline. The more time you have to build out that event, the more time you have to put creative energy into it and to collaborate with your peers on what that event's going to be, and then implement that through a pre-production strategy. And then rehearsal is key to pulling that all off. And we have an event coming up in October where we have over 15 scheduled rehearsal days. You rehearse each exec, we rehearse the panelists, when we do it individually, and so break up your rehearsals too. Don't try to get it all done in one day, because panelists and your presenters, they have time commitments as well, and recognize that. And then the big thing is that, like I said, working through that script line by line, really identifying what you want on screen and when you want it on screen and how we get there. As well as all sorts of social media notifications that you may be pushing, things like that. Work all those issues out, and those would be the 3 things I focus. The technology part is easy for us on the tech time. I know it may seem like a little, it seems like a gray area for you all, but once we read through that script, we can really build out the tech and propose a solution for you, and design it to be in budget, and that's how most production companies will approach it with you.
Thank you for those. Technology, especially social media, is something I'm really interested in. And I know later on in the conference, we have an entire session just about marketing, which I'm really excited about. One of the other questions we had is, and this is open to our group, how do we foster a free-flowing conversation between people who are virtual and people who are in person? Any tips or tricks on how to make that less awkward or delay in sound?
So one of the things that just on the production side, we have to integrate boardrooms. So you may have a lot of boardroom conversations that you're going to be maybe some of the first ones you start planning, right? Exec boards or collegiate boards that have to meet, and they want that free flow conversation. And so kind of like what we've done here, where we have each presenter each person with their own laptop, so they can engage in chat or in the Q&A, and then you install a microphone system. And the way that works is that all the microphones go back to one host machine that's going to manage that audio for you. Sometimes there can be a little bit delay when you do that, because you're basically splitting the audio up from the presenter. The only other way to get around that is make everybody wear headsets, and even that can be problematic, and you don't want to do that. So the best solution is to have everybody with a laptop so they can engage in the meeting directly, have the presentation monitors there, and then put microphones on the tables. And yeah.
And from a less kind of meeting standpoint, we have run a symposium event, which went from a live event to a series of 4 evening events. We featured a panel in each of these events, and it was very much a multimedia virtual event, and a mixture of conversation and academic discussion along with videos. And what we were very cognizant of is we wanted our presenters and our panelists and our guests, as we called them, to both know the types of questions to expect from our moderator, but then also have the opportunity to have a free-flowing conversation and to really bounce ideas off one another and comment on each other's ideas. And it's definitely a challenge when you have multiple speakers in different places. One of these in particular that comes to mind was we actually had 3 people in studio, and then we had 4 people virtually on Zoom. And so we tried our best to kind of work out a number of different ways and mechanisms that not only could we script the free-flowing conversation, which I would say was definitely kind of one of our biggest takeaways, was almost kind of the more everything was scripted, the more free-flowing and natural it could come off. And so I think that's where like the pre-production and planning that we all talk about so much really paid off for us. And then we really tried kind of different mechanisms. You know, there's multiple screens for everyone to look at, or, you know, should we use the raised hand function in Zoom for those people that are on Zoom, or they just quickly shout something out? And, you know, so it was definitely a challenge. And I would say our sort of biggest takeaway was really over communicating with the panelists and guests that we had as part of that conversation to say, hey, please don't feel afraid to jump in, to communicate with our moderators to say, hey, please don't rush it along to the next question without kind of scanning around to see, does somebody in studio or somebody, you know, remote have something to say? But yeah, it's definitely a fun challenge.
I know for events that we've hosted, our chat box is always going off. And so we always try to find a way to get our in-person to be able to see the chat box and be a part of that and conversation that happens in there. It's like an instant text messaging, and it's really fun. And so always trying to have that ability to have the side conversations that are still beneficial to the event, I think is really good ideas.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, were there any?
I was gonna add
so.
one more thing to that. As you guys were talking, you know, I make sure you know your audience, because something with virtual events that we struggled with was students. When we were working with students in their events, they were cameras off, no questions, you know, so we had to really plan in advance to try to engage them, get some predetermined questions going so that we could open up that conversation, so that they felt like they had a, you know, safe space to ask, or comfortable space to engage in, and giving them multiple options. Feel free to, you know, we want to see your face. The president would like to you know, interact with you, but if you're not comfortable, you can open it up in the chat. So giving them those options, but definitely giving them more chat live, or share with us in another way, if whatever's comfortable for you.
Thank you. Were there any additional questions we had for anyone that you heard from today? I know that Socio is no longer able to join us this afternoon right now, but we did send in the chat his email should you have any private messages for him. But are there any other messages for anyone on the panel today?
Hey, Jessica, we do have somebody here in the live audience that has a question, so I'm gonna have Heather ask her question live.
Hi, this actually goes out to anyone who's willing to answer. Do you have any tips for a hybrid event when you can't hold an in-person rehearsal for the space you're using with all of your participants?
You're in trouble. You really want to have access to that studio and make those arrangements, or you may have some challenges. You don't know. There's a lot of questions to be asked about a studio space that you haven't been in. But yeah, otherwise, it's going to be really challenging. Yeah.
Are there any additional questions that we could answer for you today? As you've been learning throughout this entire presentation, a hybrid is a beast. There's no one way of looking at it, performing a hybrid event, or executing one. It's not available to say this is how it's done. We hope that you were able to get some information from today's useful to help produce all of your hybrid events coming up. And as we mentioned, we're all here and we're all in this together. As Sam said, there is a listserv email account that you can join. And there's so many questions that come through that we all have a chance to answer and help put in our input. So make sure you remember, again, as Paul said, you're not alone. We're all in this together. And we do foresee hybrid events being the new normal moving forward past this pandemic. If there are no other questions at this time, oh, actually, we do have one more question. I apologize. For a small meeting, when the session to how to, for a small meeting, will there be a session on how to set up a simple hybrid option? So that looks like it's going to be more of a Metro Media question. So I'll go ahead and make sure that we get you the email to Metro Media so they can kind of answer those questions for you. Thank you again for joining us. I'd like to send this over to Sam at the Chancellor's office for our closing remarks.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica, and thanks to the whole group here. This was a very informative session. I'm just going to close out today's program by teasing the content of next week's sessions and by providing a few important reminders to the group here. Day 2 of our summer series on July 15th will be an exploration of ways to support our personal and professional development as event specialists. Next week, we'll start with a keynote with the wise and wonderful Jerry Echeverria on the topic of finding the leader in you. Then after a short intermission, we will have a panel discussion on strategies and tips to help your pursuit of professional development opportunities and enhance your well-being. We also encourage you again to post about your takeaways from today and to reach out to members of the CSUPN and make new friends via our social media outlets. And again, don't miss the chance to nominate a deserving colleague for an award, and we hope to see you at the award ceremony on the 29th. Finally, representatives from our sponsors will be available to meet with you in our virtual exhibit hall until 2 p.m. today. Links to join the booth are in your conference email and in the chat shortly. Already there, thanks. Don't miss that unique opportunity to connect with our sponsors. It's quite a rare chance we have to connect with them live like this. And with that, I want to thank you all again for logging on to today's sessions. A recording of today's event will be posted to the CSUEPN YouTube channel, and the link will be shared along with the slide deck with the network shortly. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I hope to see you at the rest of the summer series. Thanks.